I'm about to share something nobody else will say to you, something that could feel a little unsettling at first, but once you grasp it, once it truly sinks in, it will transform everything about how you approach these valuable years ahead of you. We've been trained our whole lives to believe that growing older means winding down, becoming smaller, fading into the shadows while younger people step into the spotlight. But I'm here to tell you that's absolute rubbish. The biggest shift of your life doesn't happen when you're young and bursting with energy, running after every glittering distraction that comes your way. No, the true magic unfolds when you arrive at the point where you finally realize your time, your energy, your very presence on this earth is far too precious to squander on things that don't serve your greater good. And here's the part that might catch you off guard. The most powerful move you can make in your later years is to turn your attention fully inward and master the sacred practice of holding your tongue. Now I know what's going through your mind. You're thinking this sounds self-centered. You're thinking you spent your entire life showing up for others, and now I'm telling you to focus on yourself. Yes, that's precisely what I'm saying. Because here's what nobody wants to acknowledge. You can't give from a cup that's already dry. And most people in their later years are running on empty, pouring out their last reserves of energy toward people who wouldn't spare them a second thought if the situation were flipped. You've earned the right to be discerning. You've earned the right to guard your peace. You've earned the right to decline without justification, to withdraw without shame, to put yourself first without regret. Take a moment to consider this. How many years have you spent justifying yourself to people who were never going to understand you in the first place? How many hours have you burned trying to persuade someone of your worth, trying to demonstrate your value, trying to get them to recognize what you contribute? And what did it get you? Did they suddenly wake up one morning and finally appreciate everything you'd done? Did they finally recognize your sacrifices? Or did they simply keep taking and taking until nothing was left to give? I've seen countless people reach their 60s, 70s, 80s, still waging the exact same wars they fought in their 20s, still chasing approval from people who decided long ago that nothing they did would ever be enough. And do you know what becomes of these people? They pass away drained, unfulfilled, resentful, wondering why life never handed them the peace they were owed. But peace was there for the taking the entire time. They simply never figured out how to stop talking long enough to accept it. Silence isn't a weakness. I need you to grasp this on the deepest level. In a world that never stops chattering, that never stops demanding, that never stops passing judgment, your quietness becomes your greatest strength. When you stop justifying yourself, you stop handing people fuel to use against you. When you stop defending yourself, you stop entering battles designed specifically to wear you down. When you stop trying to get people to understand your decisions, you release yourself from the cage of their opinions. Every word you utter carries energy. Every explanation you offer is power leaving your body. And most of the time, you're handing that power to people who haven't earned it, who won't value it, who will use it to feed their own agendas while leaving you emptied out. I spent years of my own life convinced that talking things through was always the solution. I believed that if I could just explain myself thoroughly enough, if I could just get them to see things from my angle, if I could just find the right words, everything would work itself out. But I was mistaken. Some people don't want things resolved. Some people don't want mutual understanding. Some people feed on chaos, on drama, on keeping you tangled in their dysfunction because it makes them feel significant, makes them feel in control, makes them feel less isolated in their own misery. And the instant you recognize this, the instant you truly understand that your words are being spent on people who won't value them, that's the moment you start taking your life back. Your later years aren't meant for justifications. They're not meant for defending yourself. They're not meant for proving your worth to anyone. These years exist for gathering in everything you've learned, for savoring the fruits of your effort, for finally granting yourself permission to live life on your own terms without the endless static of other people's expectations. But here's the difficulty. You've been trained since childhood to put others ahead of yourself. Your parents taught you to be courteous, to be accommodating, to always weigh how your actions land on other people. Society hammered this lesson home 1,000 different ways, insisting that your worth is measured by how useful you are to others, by your readiness to sacrifice, by your ability to keep everyone around you comfortable, even at your own expense. And now, after decades of that programming, I'm asking you to try something bold. I'm asking you to unlearn it. I'm asking you to look at every belief you've been carrying around as though it were gospel truth and question each and every one. Who decided you have to pick up every phone call? Who decided you have to attend every family function? Who decided you have to keep up relationships that drain you just because you share blood or history? Who wrote these rules, and why are you still bound by them? The answer will make you squirm. You're following them because you're scared. You're scared of being labeled selfish. You're scared of being misunderstood. You're scared of being left alone. You're scared that if you stop performing, if you stop being everything to everybody, you'll find out that no one actually cared about you at all. They only cared about what you provided for them. But let me offer you something that might sting at first, but will ultimately liberate you. If people only want you around for what you do for them, then you're not in relationships. You're in transactions. And transactional relationships will never fill that void inside you. They'll never hand you the deep connection you long for. They'll never make you feel genuinely seen, genuinely valued, genuinely loved. Instead, they'll simply keep you occupied, keep you distracted, keep you from confronting the one thing you've avoided your whole life, yourself. Because focusing on yourself isn't just about wellness rituals and long baths, though those things certainly have their place. It's about facing who you truly are when no one else is watching, when there's no crowd to perform for, when there's no part to play. It's about asking yourself the hard questions. Who am I beyond what I provide for others? What do I genuinely want from the time I have remaining? What dreams did I set aside because everyone insisted they weren't realistic? What parts of myself did I bury because they didn't match the image others expected of me? Most people spend their whole lives fleeing from these questions. They keep busy. They keep themselves needed. They stay tangled in everyone else's chaos. Because the alternative, sitting with themselves in stillness, terrifies them. But I promise you the fear is worse than the reality. Beyond that fear waits a freedom you can't even picture right now. It's the freedom to wake up and ask yourself what you want to do today, not what everyone else expects from you. And it's the freedom to chase interests that have nothing to do with being productive or useful. To learn something new simply because it captivates you. To spend hours on things that serve no purpose beyond bringing you delight. It's the freedom to look at an empty calendar and see it not as something to fill, but as something to safeguard. Precious time that belongs to you alone. And the world will push back against this. When you begin focusing on yourself, when you begin choosing silence over engagement, when you begin drawing boundaries without justification, people will resist. They'll call you cold. They'll say you've changed and not for the better. They'll accuse you of being selfish, of abandoning your duties, of forgetting your roots. They'll try every manipulation tactic in their arsenal to drag you back into your old part, back into being the person who was always reachable, always accommodating, always willing to put their own needs last. And this is precisely where your silence turns crucial. Because the moment you begin defending your choices, the moment you begin justifying why you need this, the moment you try to make them understand, you've already surrendered ground. You've handed them an opening to argue, to negotiate, to make you feel guilty. But when you remain quiet, when you simply smile and shift the topic, when you let their accusations slide off you without engaging, you keep your power intact. You're not being harsh. You're not being unkind. You're simply declining to take part in a conversation that serves no purpose except to make you feel bad for putting your own well-being first. And here's the fascinating part. Most people eventually come around. Some will fall away, and that's fine, because they were never meant to be part of this chapter of your story anyway. Others will learn to honor your boundaries, will learn that you're no longer available for their drama, will learn to engage with you in more meaningful ways, because the old approach no longer works. And a select few, a precious handful, will genuinely understand what you're doing and stand behind you, because they've been wanting to do the same thing themselves but lacked the nerve until they watched you do it first. Your later years aren't a waiting room. They're not a holding pattern until the inevitable arrives. They're not the time to merely exist while counting down the days. These years can be the most vivid, most genuine, most rewarding stretch of your entire life, if you're willing to make some uncomfortable calls. And the first uncomfortable call is accepting that you don't owe anyone anything. Not your time, not your energy, not your presence, not your involvement. You've already paid your dues. You've already shown up. You've already put in the work. Now it's time to claim your reward. And your reward is the freedom to live according to your own values, your own wants, your own vision of what a fulfilling life looks like. But freedom carries responsibility. The responsibility to know yourself well enough to make sound choices. The responsibility to be truthful about what genuinely matters to you versus what you've simply been trained to think matters. The responsibility to face your fears rather than drown them in busyness. The responsibility to stop pointing fingers at others for your circumstances and start fully owning how you spend the time you have left. Because that's what this really comes down to. Time, the most limited, most valuable resource you possess. You can always earn more money. You can always meet new people. You can always pick up new skills. But you cannot manufacture more time once it's spent. It's gone for good. And every minute you pour into things that don't serve you, every hour you hand to people who don't value you, every day you waste trying to repair things that aren't your job to repair, that's time you'll never recover. I want you to picture something with me for a moment. Imagine standing at the end of your life, looking back on these very years we're discussing right now. What do you want to see when you glance backward? Do you want to see yourself still fighting the same old fights, still chasing approval from people who were never going to grant it? Still surrendering your peace for people who took it for granted? Or do you want to see yourself finally liberated, finally at ease, finally living authentically without apology? The choice belongs to you, but here's the catch: you can't have it both ways. You can't cling to your old patterns and expect new outcomes. You can't keep feeding dysfunction and expect to find peace. You can't keep justifying yourself to people who refuse to listen and expect to feel empowered. Something must shift. And that something is you. Not because anything is wrong with you, but because the version of you that got you this far isn't built for where you need to go next. That version was engineered for survival, for earning affection, for proving worth. But you no longer need to survive. You need to flourish. You no longer need to earn love. You need to give it to yourself. You no longer need to prove your worth. You need to simply know it in your bones, with no outside validation required. And the road to this transformation runs straight through silence and self-sufficiency, being sufficiently whole and complete on your own. Now, when I speak of staying silent, I don't mean becoming a recluse or severing all human ties. I mean being deliberate with your words, purposeful in your communication, strategic about what you reveal and to whom. There's a real distinction between being genuinely quiet and being silenced by suppression. Genuine quietness springs from a place of strength, of choice, of knowing your thoughts and feelings hold enough value that you don't need to broadcast them to the world. Suppressed silence springs from fear, from feeling like your voice doesn't count, from being shut down so many times you've stopped trying to be heard. The silence I'm championing is the former, not the latter. It's conscious, intentional, empowering. Think about the most powerful people you've come across in your life. Not the loudest ones, not the most opinionated ones, but the truly powerful ones. What set them apart? They didn't feel obligated to fill every silence. They didn't feel driven to have an opinion on everything. They didn't waste their words on trivial matters. When they spoke, it carried weight because they were selective about when they chose to open their mouths. They grasped something most people never learn: less is more. One well-chosen sentence can land harder than an hour-long speech. One moment of powerful silence can say more than 1,000 explanations. Your presence, when it's grounded, centered, and thoroughly at ease with itself, speaks louder than words ever will. But arriving at that centered presence takes real effort. It requires cultivating a relationship with yourself, and for most people that relationship barely exists. You know how to be a parent, a spouse, an employee, a friend, a sibling. You know how to play every role assigned to you. But do you know how to simply be you? Do you know what you think about things independent of what you're supposed to think? Do you know what brings you joy independent of what others enjoy doing alongside you? Do you know your own values independent of the ones you inherited from family or absorbed from culture? These aren't simple questions, and they don't come with quick answers. Building this self-knowledge takes time, takes reflection, takes a willingness to sit with discomfort over what you uncover. Some of what you find will surprise you. You might discover you've been living by values you don't actually hold. You might discover that relationships you assumed were central to your identity are actually holding you back. You might discover that the life you've constructed, while perfectly acceptable, isn't the life you truly want. And then comes the real test: finding the courage to make changes at a stage in life when most people assume change is no longer an option. But let me let you in on a secret. Change is always possible. Your brain doesn't stop learning, doesn't stop adapting, doesn't stop forging new neural pathways just because you've hit a certain age. In fact, the wisdom you've gathered over the decades gives you a considerable edge in making successful changes, because you're no longer acting from youthful naivety or a desperate hunger for approval. You're operating from a place of clarity, of knowing what works and what doesn't, of understanding consequences in ways your younger self never could. So when I urge you to focus on yourself, I'm not asking you to become vain or self-obsessed. I'm asking you to finally give yourself the attention, the care, the consideration you've spent your entire life giving everyone else. I'm asking you to treat yourself as though you matter, because you do. I'm asking you to invest in your own growth, your own happiness, your own peace, with the same energy you've poured into everyone else. And I'm asking you to do this without guilt, without apology, without constantly glancing over your shoulder to check for approval. Because here's the truth, hard as it may be to accept, most people aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you imagine. They're too consumed with themselves, worrying about their own lives, wrestling with their own problems. The judgment you fear, the criticism you brace for, the rejection you're trying to dodge, most of it exists only inside your own head. And the small fraction that does exist beyond your mind, in other people's actual opinions, matters far less than you think. Someone else's opinion of you is none of your business. Let me repeat that, because it matters. Someone else's opinion of you is none of your business. Their thoughts about you, their judgments about your choices, their feelings about your boundaries, all of that belongs to them. It's not your job to manage it, to change it, or even to respond to it. You can't dictate what anyone thinks of you. You could be the most generous, kind, selfless person alive, and someone will still find fault with you. You could live entirely by everyone else's expectations, and someone will still be let down. So if you can't win either way, why not at least please yourself in the process? Why not choose authenticity over performance, peace over approval, truth over pretense? The energy you've been spending managing other people's perceptions could instead go toward building the life you actually want. Pause and consider that. All the mental effort you pour into worrying what others think, planning what to say to dodge conflict, rehearsing justifications for your choices, that's energy that could fuel creative pursuits. Deepen your grasp of subjects that fascinate you, develop skills you've always wanted to learn, or simply let you enjoy the present moment without the constant hum of anxiety about how you're perceived. The quality of your life is directly tied to the quality of your thoughts. If your mind stays occupied with other people's opinions, with defending yourself, with justifying yourself, with proving yourself, you're living inside a mental prison of your own making. But the door to that prison has been unlocked the whole time. You just have to be willing to step through it. Stepping through that door means making peace with the fact that some people won't understand your transformation. Your children might see you as selfish when you start declining babysitting requests. Your siblings might think you're deserting the family when you stop attending every gathering. Your longtime friends might think you've grown dull when you're no longer drawn to the same activities or conversations. And all of these reactions, however uncomfortable to witness, aren't yours to fix. It's not your job to make everyone comfortable with your growth. Your job is to grow. Your job is to evolve. Your job is to become the fullest, most genuine version of yourself possible with the time remaining. And if that unsettles some people, that discomfort is theirs to process, not yours to solve. This is where staying silent shifts from philosophy to practical strategy. When someone challenges your new boundaries, your instinct is likely to explain, to justify, to make them understand why these changes are necessary. But explaining is engaging, and engaging keeps you trapped in the old dynamic. Instead, practice lines like, "I appreciate your concern. I'm not available for that," without any further elaboration. These statements don't invite debate. They don't crack the door open for negotiation. They simply state your position and stop there. The silence that follows, however uncomfortable, is where the real power resides. In that quiet, the other person has to sit with their own feelings about your boundary. They have to decide whether they'll respect it or not. And their decision tells you everything you need to know about whether that relationship deserves further investment. Relationships that can't withstand your boundaries aren't relationships worth keeping. This might be the toughest truth you'll face in this process. We're taught that relationships demand compromise, demand give and take, demand flexibility. And that's true up to a point, but there's a real difference between healthy compromise and losing yourself. Healthy compromise happens when two people collaborate to find solutions honoring both of their needs. Self-abandonment happens when one person repeatedly sacrifices their needs, their preferences, their well-being to keep the peace or dodge conflict or keep someone else content. If you've been practicing self-abandonment for years or decades in certain relationships, drawing boundaries will feel like an earthquake to the other person. They've grown used to your compliance, your flexibility, your readiness to put them first. When that suddenly stops, they experience it as a loss, as betrayal, as you turning difficult. But you're not responsible for how they feel about your growth. You're not responsible for helping them adjust to the new you. You're not responsible for making this easy on them. Your only responsibility is to yourself, to your well-being, to your peace. And if they can't accept that, if they can't adjust to relating to you as a person with your own needs rather than a supporting character in their story, then they're revealing exactly who they are. Believe them. Don't make excuses on their behalf. Don't convince yourself they'll change if you just give them more time. Don't tell yourself you're being too harsh or too rigid. Trust what their behavior is showing you and act on it. And acting on it might mean limiting contact, might mean cutting phone calls short when they become exhausting, might mean turning down invitations, might even mean ending relationships that no longer serve you. I know that sounds severe. I know it runs against everything you've been taught about loyalty, commitment, and sticking by people through thick and thin. But here's what nobody tells you about loyalty. It should run both ways. Commitment should be mutual. And standing by someone shouldn't require losing yourself in the process. You can love people from a distance. You can wish them well without being actively wrapped up in their lives. You can care about their well-being without sacrificing your own. These aren't contradictions. They're the nuanced reality of mature, healthy relationship boundaries. And learning to hold these nuances, accepting that you can feel multiple things at once, caring about someone while also needing distance from them, loving your family while also recognizing they're not good for your mental health, appreciating someone's good qualities while also acknowledging the relationship has run its course. This is part of the wisdom that comes with age, if you're willing to embrace it. But most people aren't willing. Most would rather cling to familiar dysfunction than face the unknown of change. They'd rather complain about their circumstances than take action to change them. They'd rather stay in relationships that exhaust them than risk being alone. And if that's where you currently stand, I'm not judging you. I understand it. Change is terrifying, especially after a lifetime spent building an identity around certain relationships and roles. Letting go of that identity, even when it's making you miserable, feels like dying. And in a way, it is a death. It's the death of who you thought you had to be, who you were told to be, who you've been pretending to be. But death isn't the ending. It's transformation. It's the necessary step before rebirth. You can't become who you're meant to be without releasing who you've been. You can't step into your power without leaving behind the powerless version of yourself that others found so convenient. That powerless version, the one who said yes when she wanted to say no, the one who smiled through discomfort, the one who put everyone else's feelings above her own, that version served a purpose. It kept you safe. It helped you belong. It carried you through times when you lacked the strength or resources to stand alone. But you're not that person anymore. You have strength now. You have resources now. You have wisdom now. You have the capacity to stand alone. And more importantly, you understand that standing alone is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Because loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing. Loneliness is feeling alone even surrounded by people, feeling unseen, unheard, misunderstood despite your best efforts to connect. Solitude is choosing to be alone, having space to think your own thoughts, hear your own voice, remember who you are beneath all the roles and expectations. Solitude is where transformation happens. It's where you finally gain the mental and emotional room to process everything you've been through, integrate the lessons, and decide who you want to become going forward. But our culture dreads solitude. We're taught that being alone means something's wrong with you, that you're unlikable, that you've failed the basic human task of building relationships. So people stay busy, stay connected, stay engaged even when it's destroying them, because the alternative, being alone with themselves, seems worse than the slow death of self-abandonment. But I'm telling you, it's not worse. The discomfort of solitude is fleeting. The pain of living a life that isn't yours, that lasts unless you choose otherwise. The awkwardness of learning to be with yourself fades. The regret of reaching the end of your life having never truly lived, that haunts you until your last breath. So how do you begin this process? How do you start focusing on yourself and embracing silence when everything in your life is arranged to prevent exactly that? You start small. You don't have to blow up your entire life overnight. You don't have to write dramatic letters explaining your transformation to everyone. You don't have to make grand declarations. You simply start making different choices, one at a time, in small ways that gradually accumulate into big changes. You start by noticing where you're pouring your time and energy. Over the next week, pay attention to how you spend your days. Notice which activities leave you feeling energized and which leave you feeling drained. Notice which relationships feel nourishing and which feel exhausting. Notice which conversations you genuinely enjoy and which you're merely enduring out of obligation. Don't judge what you notice, just observe. Awareness is the first step toward change. Once you've built some awareness, you start making small adjustments. Maybe you decide you're no longer available for hours-long phone calls where you're essentially serving as a free therapist for someone who never once asks about your life. You don't need to end the friendship. You simply set a boundary. When they call, you can talk for 20 minutes and then you have somewhere to be. You don't explain what that is. You don't apologize for it. You just create the boundary and hold it. Will they be upset? Maybe. Will they adjust? Probably. And if they don't, if they can't even respect this small boundary, then you now have valuable information about the relationship that you can use to guide further decisions. Maybe you decide to spend one morning a week doing something purely for yourself, something with no productive value, no purpose beyond bringing you joy. Maybe it's sitting in a coffee shop reading. Maybe it's taking a long walk in nature. Maybe it's painting or gardening or photography or writing or any of a million things you've been postponing because you thought you didn't have time, when what you really lacked was permission to prioritize yourself. Give yourself that permission. No one else is going to grant it for you. You're waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to choose yourself, but that day isn't coming. The only person who can free you from the prison of obligation is you. The key is already in your hand. All you have to do is turn it. Maybe you decide to practice staying quiet when your adult children complain about their lives, instead of jumping in with advice or trying to fix their problems. This is especially hard for parents since fixing has been your job for so long. But your children are grown now. They don't need you to solve their problems. Most of the time they simply need to vent, to process, to feel heard. And you can offer them that without wearing yourself out trying to resolve situations that aren't yours to resolve. When they complain, you can say that sounds really tough, and then simply listen. You don't offer solutions unless they specifically ask for them. You don't absorb their emotions as your own. You don't lie awake worrying over their choices. You care, you listen. And then you let them handle their own lives. This is love. This is respect. This is recognizing that they're capable adults who can work things out, and the mental energy you save by not managing their lives can be redirected toward managing your own. Or maybe you decide to stop participating in family drama. Every family has it. Those recurring conflicts, those old grudges rehashed at every gathering, those power struggles that have been playing out for decades. You probably played a part in this drama, maybe as mediator, maybe as referee, maybe as the one trying to keep everyone content. What if you simply stopped? What if the next time someone tries to drag you into the middle of an argument, you simply say, "I'm staying out of this one," and mean it? What if you stopped taking sides, stopped explaining one person to another, stopped trying to make everyone get along? It's not your job to manage other people's relationships with each other. It's not your responsibility to keep the family in harmony.